Welcome back to day 27 of Pause, 40 Words for the 40 Days of Lent. I am Reverend Linda Snyder, pastor of Middle Church in Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania, and our word today is enemies. Our scripture today comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 44 and 45. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. If you haven't already paused in silence before the Lord, pause this video and do so now. We don't like to admit it, but we all have enemies. We want to think that we love everyone and that everyone loves us, but that is highly unlikely. There are people who have hurt us, some with vicious intent, and some quite accidentally. Sometimes our enemies pop up even in our family circle. One of the most difficult challenges for a Christ follower is loving his or her enemies. Not only does Jesus love his enemies, but he wants us to do so as well. Obviously, Jesus believes that there can be little spiritual growth until we start to love those whom we consider enemies. Often the first step in loving enemies is praying for them. Praying for our enemies discourages us from saying or doing anything nasty to those we dislike. Prayer also has the power to change our attitudes. Maybe this is why Jesus specifically tells his disciples to pray for their enemies. Remember yesterday's devotion about Jesus washing the feet of his disciples? We will never be able to wash the feet of those who have hurt us until we allow Jesus, the one we have hurt, to wash our feet, to admit that we have enemies. Unconfessed and unforgiven sin is a never-ending cycle of broken relationships, broken communities, and broken nations. Lent invites us to remember that Jesus washed the feet not just of the disciples who would end up spreading the good news that he was the Messiah, but he washed the feet of Judas as well. And he washes our feet, knowing we too will betray him. I can't imagine it was easy for Jesus to wash the feet of his closest friends who would deny and betray him. And he knows that it won't be easy for you and for me to forgive our enemies and to pray for our enemies. But God never calls us to do what he hasn't already done. For today's practice, one practical way for the love of Christ to flow through you is to extend forgiveness to someone who has hurt you, an enemy. So think of a person today to whom you might offer forgiveness. How can you show the love of Christ to this person? Perhaps offering forgiveness is just a bit too hard right now. So here's another option. Pick someone with whom you are not on speaking terms and take a few minutes to pray specifically for God's blessing on his or her life. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven.